Hello and welcome, star people. Welcome back to the Outlaw Astrology Podcast. I am APM, your intrepid star guide and cosmic detective. And a brief acknowledgement. Thank you very much for being here. That's the brief acknowledgement and some housekeeping. There is a newsletter called the Daily Stargazer, free and paid. We are also on Pinterest, Instagram, and YouTube. You can find those links in the show notes. And I would greatly appreciate it if you could rate and review on wherever you listen to podcasts, in particular Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts, so that other people can find us as well and benefit. And with that being said, thank you very much for listening. And today we're going to continue our archetypal hero's journey through the zodiac, ascending from Scorpio's depths into the expansive horizons of Sagittarius the Seeker. Now, having faced transformation and surrendered to life's mysteries with Scorpio, we, the hero, now emerge with renewed hunger for meaning, for truth, for the vast possibilities that lie beyond our familiar boundaries, which we traversed with Scorpio. So join me, APM, as we explore the hero, transformed by the underworld journey, and now that hero sets forth on a quest for wisdom that transcends cultural programming and conventional thinking. Alrighty. So, the philosophical quest, that's how I'd put it about Sagittarius energy. That's literally, it is a quest. A journey sounds meandering, and Sagittarian energy gallops. It does not meander, okay? So it's a philosophical quest. The quest being, what's philosophical about it? It's to find one's own meaning, one's own purpose, one's own calling, one's own perspective, one's own for life philosophy or worldview, okay? So Sagittarius represents the hero's natural expansion after intense transformation. So the intuitive, the instinctive reaching toward broader horizons after facing death and rebirth. And Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, the largest planet in the solar system, and a planet of growth, expansion, and abundance, as well as generosity. This mutable fire sign embodies the innate hunger for meaning beyond material existence. So unlike Scorpio's intense focus on what lies beneath, Sagittarius has a panoramic vision that integrates diverse perspectives. And that diverse perspective has an affinity for the ninth house, because you're going to, if you leave the world of what you know and understand, that's the third house, the local, the comfort zone, which you know and understand is in early life. The ninth house represents diverse philosophies, beliefs, and perspectives, and that is why, in my opinion, it has such a great affinity with the sign of Sagittarius and the planet Jupiter. So it's the phase in the hero's journey where we must venture beyond the familiar, risking the comfort of certainty for the adventure of discovery. So the seeker, or the explorer, or the wanderer, understands that truth cannot be possessed per se. See, possessed is a very Taurus thing, which is the other side of that axis of Scorpio. And it must be continually pursued, hence the quest, and requires a willingness to remain open rather than settling into rigid conclusions. So Saturn in Sagittarius, for example, when people say Sagittarians are dogmatic, we here at Outlaw Astrology and Outlaw Astrology Podcast understand that to mean we're looking at planetary archetypes, not just the signs. See, when people just say the sign does this and the sign does that, that's false. It is an energy. The planet is that planet is saying something there. So Saturn in Sagittarius tends toward rigid conclusions, tends toward rigid belief systems, tends toward being dogmatic. And Mars in Sag would be the self-righteous part. You know, all planets can lead to that, can give you that type of energy, But Mars in Sagittarius, not that it's more so, but self-righteousness, I attribute that more to Mars in Sag energy. And so it's not that Sagittarius is dogmatic, it's that a certain placement in Sagittarius, meaning Saturn, is dogmatic. It means that being self-righteous, meaning a certain planet in Sagittarius, that would be Mars, is dogmatic. Not the sign of Sagittarius. Sign of Sagittarius is merely an expression, a way that one could express certain energies in the chart. Okay? And so this desire to continually pursue meaning requires a willingness to remain open, receptive, rather than settling into rigid conclusions, as I've said, and also defending Mars energy again, and being self-righteous, Mars and Sagittarius energy. So, for here, I think of Hermes Mercury. Now, the interesting thing about Hermes is that this particular, or Mercury, this archetype goes all the way back to Kamut, otherwise known as Egypt, ancient Egypt in particular. And you might hear, if you study magic or the esoteric, or if you continue on with this podcast, thank you very much, or if you study tarot or other magical systems, you're going to hear about Hermes Trismegistus. And that means thrice great Hermes. And that does not refer to Hermes particularly, it refers to the god Thoth. Some of you may have heard Thoth called Thoth, or Thoth. I've heard all of those, depends on the lineage. And the reason why Thoth is known as thrice great Hermes, because that is what Hermes Trismegistus refers to Thoth, the Kamutian god of everything that Hermes stands for, including magic, is because they believed when they found out about him and created Hermes and eventually Mercury, they thought he was greater than any creation that they could have made. You know, even greater than their own god that refers to that god. So that's that story. That's where it comes from. So Hermes Mercury is the messenger of the gods in the Greek pantheon and the Roman pantheon. And this god travels between worlds and also is one of the few gods from the Olympic pantheon to go to the underworld and can come back. He can go anywhere between realms, including the underworld, as a messenger god. Known for having, when you see that sigil of Mercury, you'll see what looks like horns, but it's actually the cap that Hermes wore that had wings on it, and he also was known to be swift and fleet of foot, and represents the Sagittarian quest for knowledge across boundaries. Now, here's the interesting thing about this energy. Mercury, the planet, is considered to be in detriment in Sagittarius. Why? Because Mercury is about intellect and communication, but it's more of a zoomed-in type of experience. It's more about our personal thoughts, our personal thinking, in addition to what's around us in our locality. Whereas Mercury in Sagittarius is zoomed out and holistic. You can't see details when you're zoomed out. The same way you can't see the forest for the trees or the trees for the forest and any details if you're zoomed in. So you can't see the entire forest if you're looking at one tree. And if you're zoomed way in looking at a leaf, you're not going to be able to see the tree or the rest of the forest. So it is a letting go in a manner of speaking. If you go for zoomed out, you miss detail, but you get the whole picture. If you go in for the details, you miss the whole picture. You have to release one or the other and make a choice there, and it's uncomfortable. And so Mercury talks about it's the quest for knowledge across boundaries. Mercury, Hermes, and Thoth were psychopomps. They're guides of souls, and they embody the journey between different realms of understanding and comprehension, the ability to translate between seemingly incompatible perspectives. Now, incompatible perspective would be an opposition aspect. And Mercury has the ability to go between different perspectives and hide in the cracks and in the fringe of perspectives to come out with a completely new and in some times completely alternative to what was intended by the overculture. So when we're looking at Mercury, we're looking at that transgressive energy, that energy that has no interest per se, particularly in just what is comfortable, what is known. It is the uncomfortable, the unknown, and where that might be found. And sometimes it's found in the crevices, the cracks, the holes in the world that we pretend don't exist but actually really do exist. And so Hermes, that Mercury energy, is always teaching us to quest for knowledge across boundaries, to not stop where it's comfortable, to not stop where it's uncomfortable, to look in between perspectives for the chance of expansion and greater knowledge. And one of the challenges of Sagittarius is breaking free from cultural programming. And Sagittarius shadows emerge when our search for meaning calcifies into dogmatic belief systems to replace authentic questioning. Okay, now, as I've said, Sagittarians are no more likely to be dogmatic or self-righteous than any other sign of the zodiac. We have to be very careful about making the assumption that Sagittarians have these traits and Scorpios have those traits. No, it's merely a means of expression. And if we are tired, if our nervous system is dysregulated, or there's a lot of crises, or we've got too many plates and we're trying to spin them all, that's when you're likely to experience those times when the shadow will come forth. And here's the thing. As Scorpio teaches us, we don't have the ability to control all the time, or even most of the time, when this is going to happen. That most of the time events will occur, and sometimes we can get in front of them, and sometimes we have to run alongside, and sometimes they get in front of us. And understanding the hero's journey from a Sagittarian perspective allows us to include those moments when we're not able to be receptive. I'm not suggesting that anyone should be receptive all the time. You're not going to always have that ability. You don't always get to choose when you're going to be receptive. Sometimes you just don't have the capacity to hold another point of view in addition to all the other points of view you're holding in addition to the rest of your life. So when we're looking at dogmatic systems that replace authentic questioning, we're looking at Mercury, Saturn type of vibe. That's the archetypal vibe here. Because authentic questioning, that's Mercury. But it's also Jupiter, because Jupiter is the sign that is the planet that is has the most affinity with Sagittarian energy. And so that dogmatic systems, that's a Saturn thing. And authentic questioning, that's Mercury, or it can be Jupiter, because Jupiter can be considered a higher vibe from the Mercury. When I say higher, I don't mean better. I mean expanded perspective, meaning altitude, meaning more holistic. That's what I mean. And so, while it's not the only sign capable of dogmatism at all, by any means, unintegrated Sagittarius energy can manifest as spiritual bypassing, and it uses like high-minded concepts to avoid the messiness of embodied existence. And we all know those people who think that being spiritual means that they can just bypass all the uncomfortable complexities that is being human. Now, a quick side note, I've done that a lot. As a person who I understand spiritual bypassing, because I used to do it quite often. When I was into more New Age spirituality, I had a tendency to use affirmations, new spiritual philosophies like Buddhism, for example, would be used because I was uncomfortable. I've had for me, emotions are a mixed bag. Emotions and feelings are a mixed bag. They are necessary. They provide critical feedback to help me build the most thriving and fun life and deeply rewarding life I can imagine. However, it comes with a lot of challenges that I don't know always how to navigate, and I found that New Age spirituality allowed me to feel good all the time, so I thought, wow, I should just do this all the time so I can feel good all the time, which, as you can probably note, the likelihood of me feeling good 100% of the time is just not how this universe works, and so I was doomed to meet up with that clash of energy when I realized that this was not sustainable and would in fact be exhausting. So when we're talking about our educational religious institutions often reflect this shadow. And so it's offering up a pre-packaged worldviews rather than the tools for independent inquiry. Okay, so genuine Sagittarian wisdom understands that true freedom and liberation requires the courage to question even our most cherished beliefs, especially those we've inherited without examination. And that is not comfortable. My own experience has proven to me that I can get it wrong, and I can get it wrong big and often. The only way to learn is to make mistakes. And we're taught in our culture that mistakes are tragedies that we will never recover from, or sins that we must hide, or personal failings that we must shore up and correct. When the truth of the matter is that you're always going to have beliefs that you cherish, which will be your comfort zone, and you'll always have events, people, experiences that are going to push against those beliefs. And the whole point of that isn't to say, you know what, it is a personal failing that I am questioning my cherished beliefs, that I must be a bad person because I'm questioning these, because I am always critiquing them. But I'm always saying, yes, but is that really true? And rather than seeing it as an honest and receptive process, meaning that it is natural to question. It is natural to doubt. It is natural to challenge even what you cherish most deeply. Now, my own experience, I was raised in an organized religion, and they had very strict ideas, Christian, by the way, and very strict ideas about what made a good person. And into this fray is a person who would be very Jupiterian in energy, because Jupiter is also gurus and mentors. And so I met someone when I was in middle school aged that kind of cast a bit of doubt on all of that. They were Christian, but they were feminist. So it wasn't our father, it was our father and mother. That was very unique. They had values that they were unapologetically standing behind. And by the way, this mentor that I met when I was about 11 years old was a Sun in Scorpio person. So the whole point of their conscious existence was to look underneath rocks and to integrate what is repressed, what others put in shade or in darkness. That was literally what they did all of their life. And they did it through music, because they were also a musician, a guitar player, a singer, and also a songwriter. And not that much older than me, but someone who reshaped my worldview. Worldview is a ninth house correspondence. Okay? So, back to Sagittarius. It is not unusual for us to have beliefs we inherit without examination. I did not examine that God could be any other gender than male. I did not examine that God could be any other emotion than angry. I did not examine that, is it really kind to condemn this group of people or that group of people or all of these people, but just say that we're the special true ones and they're all going to burn, burn, burn for eternity? That started to be a question. Wouldn't have happened had I not met this person who had a totally different worldview, even though they grew up in the bosom of middle class security and stability. However, I am absolutely grateful having met them, because it shifted my worldview and helped me become the person I now am, and eventually the person I will become in the future. So a mature seeker recognizes that expanding our consciousness isn't about accumulating exotic experiences alone or intellectual concepts alone, but about developing the capacity to perceive beyond cultural conditioning and recognizing the underlying patterns that connect seemingly disparate realities. And so our hero, meaning us, after we leave Scorpionic depths, we're now going to be faced with sometimes exotic experiences. Now, exotic experiences is a polysemous, meaning it has many different meanings depending on who is standing there making that assessment. So what is exotic to me may not be exotic to you, my dear listeners. You may have a completely different idea of what that may look like, and so exotic meaning different. Experiences that we were not able to have as youths, meaning that we might go to university and get all fired up and become feminist, or get all fired up and become an LGBTQ plus activist or an ally, or become even more, or maybe even a born-again Christian if we're not naturally a Christian. And so Saturn experiences are rather like coming to young adulthood, new adulthood, young adulthood, where you're starting to figure out your identity. Scorpio is the depths of teenage experience. Saturn, Sagittarius is new adult, late teens, early 20s, like university age. You're coming around all these cool ideas, all these new things that are completely different in perspective and way beyond Gemini energy, because Gemini introduces others and their perspectives, but Saturn energy and Jupiter energy takes that to an extreme, and it is a evolved, not better, I would say an expanded version or expanded vision is how I would see this. So that mature seeker would be integrating and living through an expanded vision of life and of beliefs and etc. And so the whole point of the exercise, you definitely want to move beyond cultural conditioning and also tribal conditioning so you can see underlying patterns. And here I introduce Buddha, otherwise known as Gautama Buddha, whose journey from a sheltered prince to a spiritual seeker perfectly captures the Sagittarian quest for truth beyond comfortable illusions. And so, like I said, you go from being a sheltered prince and deciding, I want to know the truth of the world. I want to know the truth of reality, metaphysics in particular. I want to understand the deepest nature of reality, which is very Scorpionic, and I must go on a quest, meaning I must leave that all I know, that I am comfortable with, servants and being catered to go out there into that grand and vast wilderness where I'm probably not going to have the comforts of home and people tending to my needs in order to get that meaning, that belief, that deep understanding that I seek. And that is searching for truth beyond those comfortable illusions. And so when I'm looking at truth beyond comfortable illusions, I'm looking at Jupiter and the moon connections. I'm also looking at Jupiter and Mercury connections, because what's comfortable is definitely the moon. Illusions, however, are Neptune. So Moon Neptune, I'd be looking for that. So Moon Neptune would be my first choice. That'd be comfortable illusions. And truth beyond that would be Jupiter. So those three energies playing together, Mercury, Jupiter, and Moon Neptune, would be truth beyond comfortable illusions. So he also had a middle path, Buddha did, a middle path philosophy that reflects the Sagittarian challenge of finding balance between, because every sign has to find balance between opposing opposites to find that third middle way that Rumi speaks of when he says that beyond good and evil, beyond these opposites, I'm paraphrasing, that meet me in the field beyond that, I will meet you there. Meaning, I'll be waiting for you once you get beyond the black and white, beyond dichotomies, beyond this rigid view of reality and the multiverse and the universe and the cosmos. Once you get beyond that, I will be waiting for you there. And I rather like that interpretation. And so it speaks to that middle path. And the middle path, we're often taught, is that it is the most mature path, not necessarily. He calls it the middle path philosophy. That's what Buddha calls it. I call it the path beyond. And it is the expanded path that finds balance between expansion and moderation, and between questioning everything and finding a way to work with the world as it is. So it is questioning and going, okay, this is the way the world is. How do I work with this world as it is, question it, whilst also working for something, moving towards something better than this, something that expands beyond this, which leads us to embodied wisdom. Now, when I think embodied wisdom, I think of the fact that Sagittarius is both man and beast. Top half would be the body, head, body, arms, torso of a human, and the forelegs and back legs of a horse. And so that's the embodied wisdom. It is a unification of opposites, rather like Baphomet, which is the Golden Dawn, I believe, created that. I believe it was them, but, you know, an occultist, 19th century, early 20th century occultist created the Baphomet image, which is basically the one most people know is the devil, which is the top half female, and then the bottom half goat, more goat and less female, meaning that it's a unity of opposites, which is what we can also see Sagittarius as, a unity of opposites. Meaning that if we want to evolve beyond the Sagittarius shadow, we must understand that authentic wisdom isn't found solely in books, in teachers, or in distant pilgrimages. It can also be found and emerges sometimes through the integration of lived experience with philosophical inquiry. So, like Chiron, the wounded healer centaur, we must reconcile the animal part, meaning we have a body, with our higher aspirations, what our mind wants to do. So embodied wisdom is lived wisdom. Wisdom that is a felt experience, it is a sense experience, which makes Sagittarius a far more complicated sign than we are all led to believe. And so the mature Sagittarian seeker realizes, and that's our hero, realizes that truth is not an absolute. It is contextual. It is constantly evolving. It is multifaceted. It is always shape-shifting, and also nonlinear. So it doesn't mean that we have to surrender to relativism, but it allows us to develop the capacity to hold paradoxes, like change is the only constant in the cosmos. Understanding that seemingly contradictory truths or wisdoms can coexist together, as long as we are viewing them from a broader perspective. Okay? And that can be internal within us. You know, you can have that part of us that wants to stay home, and the other part of us, like Walter Mitty, for example, who was a bit of a milquetoast, who had what we consider a rather mundane job, you know, living a very routine life, but his imagination was off the charts. I would say from pop culture, that energy is also a bit Sagittarian in nature. And so Sagittarius is at its highest expression when it teaches us that joy and wisdom are not separate paths, that the esoteric and the ecstatic expression of consciousness can occur through celebration as well as contemplation, because Sagittarius energy is exploring consciousness, the expansion of consciousness through the ecstatic, through the self-righteous, through the sometimes even dogmatic. That is still experiencing consciousness, okay, especially if the sun is in Sagittarius. And the seeker part finds truth not in escaping the physical world, because that's what that centaur, which is the symbol for Sagittarius, talks about. That's the physical world. Escaping the physical world would be Neptune in Sagittarius, Neptune in Sag would have that escape, meaning sometimes we need to escape. I am not against escape. Sometimes We are, as I said, our nervous system is a bit dysregulated. We have a lot of crises, a lot of strife, a lot of challenge going on. Escape is your brain's way of taking a time out. And they need to be written into the schedule, into our schedule. So that also is another truth that we're learning about with Sagittarius energy, is by, in addition to experiencing fully, both in body and in mind, hence the horse part, body, and the mind part, the human, which is the centaur symbol, and engaged in a venture of discovery. That is definitely Jupiter energy. So here we've got the god Dionysus, and the god of ecstatic experience and ritual madness, who embodies Sagittarius' need to expand consciousness beyond rational limitations. Now, Dionysus eventually married I'm trying to remember the goddess. It's not Ariadne. It was Ariadne. I believe he the god of ecstatic experience marries Ariadne, who got discarded by another hero in another myth. That's for another time. But he had maenads, which were like the handmaidens for all of his revelries. Much like the god Pan, he tended to dwell in forests, open fields, round bonfires, in nature where people could connect to him. So that Dionysus energy was connected particularly to the grounded parts of what it means to be human. He was a god and had a god, I believe Zeus, as a parent, depending on the story and the lineage, but tended to spend time like Chiron did, like Pan did, like Hecate did, like Ceres and Demeter did, and Persephone did, by being on Earth with the people. So having greater access to human experience. The whole point of Sag experience is lived experience, meaning putting experience under your feet. And so Dionysus takes us beyond rational limitations, because logic and reason can only take us so far. And so the association he has with breaking free from social constructs and accessing divine wisdom through altered states reflects how transcendent truth can emerge through joyful experience rather than just esoteric denial or aesthetic denial, and which is what we're taught. That aesthetic denial is Saturn energy, very, very Saturn. And altered states is Neptune. So if Neptune on the sun, that would be altered states, because Neptune is also the planet of altered states, and the ninth house represents altered states as well. So yes, you can do altered states, and he had wines and potions that he mixed, and women would leave their homes and join him, and they get so ecstatic that they would just, they'd go mad, literally. And there are a few psychologists out there who believe that sometimes the experience of transcending, or the experience of living beyond into our expanded selves, is actually akin to psychosis, is actually quite a fascinating idea and very, very Sagittarian. So here's where we come to our close. Sagittarius energy, when we have the hero, it leaves depths and now it comes forth into the world. And, oopsie, let me lower that. We conclude that our exploration of Sagittarius, and we consider that the seeker teaches us to find meaning through not clinging to certainty, but through embracing the journey itself. So you've come out of the underworld and not unscathed, not undamaged, and you enter up into walking through the hole in the earth, back into the world of human beings, and certainty is now a thing of the past, and now you must embrace the journey itself with all of its slings, its arrows, and its ebbs and its flows. And so the key to embodying the archetype here lies in not having all of the answers, but in getting better at asking questions and remaining open to what answers emerge, with the understanding that happiness is never guaranteed. So in our journeys this week, notice where we might be limiting our perspective through unexamined beliefs or even cultural programming. And so experimenting with a revolutionary act of genuine curiosity. That is not to accumulate more knowledge for the sake of having more knowledge, but to perceive the world with fresh eyes. And that's very much the Fool card. And so the seeker's wisdom lies in recognizing that the quest for truth is endless. Therein lies its beauty. So if you found this episode particularly valuable, and you've enjoyed the exploration of Sagittarian's expansive vision, consider sharing it with someone who might be questioning their own inherited beliefs or seeking broader horizons, much like Wednesday Addams does on Wednesday. So, until next time, before we get to that, I always do this. Before we get to that, I have a newsletter called The Daily Stargazer. There's a pre and paid version. Link in the show notes. The Outlaw Astrology is on Pinterest, Instagram, and YouTube. Links in the show notes. And also, very much appreciate you being here. Please feel free to leave a review. Give us 5 stars wherever you listen to podcasts, but also in particular Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music, so that other people can find us with greater ease. And thank you very much for listening. And until next time, when we build enduring structures with Capricorn the Builder, may your questions be as valuable as your answers, and may you find joy in the seeking itself. Peace and astro magic.